Welcome to the Smart Business Revolution.
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 You want a revolution?
You say you want a revolution?
Revolution. The revolution.
It's going on right now.
Welcome to The Revolution, the Smart Business Revolution podcast, where we ask today's most successful entrepreneurs to share the tools and strategies they use to build relationships and connections to grow their revenue. Now, your host for The Revolution, John Corcoran.
All right, welcome everyone. John Corcoran here, the host of this show. And if you're new, you haven't heard any of our episodes before, of course, first start with the archives because we've got great interviews with smart CEOs, founders, and entrepreneurs of all kinds of companies. We've got Netflix, we've got Kinko's, YPO, EO, Activation Blizzard. We had Grubhub recently. Got all kinds of good ones. And of course, this episode brought to you by my company, Rise25, where we help B2B businesses to get clients, referrals, and strategic partnerships with done-for-you podcasts and content marketing. And if you're listening and curious about it, go to our website, rise25.com. You can learn all about it. And my guest here today, I'm excited. His name is Lee Prosenjak. He's a highly experienced facilitator and strategist. He's got a couple of decades of experience working with entrepreneurs and leaders across dozens of different countries. And he's held various different roles in facilitating different groups like EO, Entrepreneurs Organization, groups and retreats and things along those lines, which, as you know, if you listened to this show before, I'm active there. But he also has a lot of experience in entrepreneurship. He and his wife, Stephanie, has owned and operated a dance studio in Denver, Colorado for 20 plus years. And so they have been running that. And one interesting story about him, first of all, he started his career doing lighting design in the rock concert world. So that's really interesting. I'm going to ask him about that. But he also set a goal of going and living part-time in the Bahamas, which is where he joins us from today in the Bahamas. So he splits his time between Denver and Bahamas, and who doesn't want to live that beautiful life? He also is a master trainer, of course, with EO, and Hesse Partners is the other organization that he's facilitated with. He does consulting and facilitation through that. Lee, it's such a pleasure to have you here today. And I love to ask people about how they got started in entrepreneurship, especially if you did it as a kid. And I know that you were out there hustling. You had some little side hustles when you were growing up. So tell us about them.
Thanks, John. Really appreciate being here. And it's such a fun and funny question. I love it. So I'm glad that we'll get started with that. My best friend Kevin and I were hustlers, I think, since inception. I'm not sure, but Kevin lived 4 houses away from me. We were together and basically, inseparable. Is that the right word? I don't know. Inseparable.
Yeah. Yes.
One of those. Since very early age. And at some point, we must have been about 14 or so. I guess I had the paper route and that sort of stuff. But right around 14, we had a friend, this guy, Chris, and he had a moped. And that's when we saw unlimited possibility. And so Kevin and I would go around and deliver things to people, much like Uber Eats, but we did candy and all sorts of other things, just around to people that we knew. Half so we could joyride on this moped, but the second half was because we figured out stuff that we could sell easily. At this point, we had zero transportation costs, so that was a really good bonus. So we like to call that pure profit. And honestly, we were not so good to Chris as a friend. Because we fully took advantage of his moped and access to the moped. So
you're ahead of your time. I mean, I live near here in San Francisco. There's tons of mopeds doing food delivery all over the place.
Yeah, it's super trendy, right? Like we were just So whatever. That's Uber Eats got their start from us. That's fine. That's cool. All good.
So you sounded like a budding entrepreneur at a young age, but then you found yourself into lighting design at rock concerts. What was that world like?
Yeah, I grew up in the theater, so I was constantly at the theater in my hometown, Youngstown, Ohio. Shout out to the Youngstown Playhouse. That's where I got all my starts, and so many great life lessons that came from that, and the teamwork and camaraderie. And my best friends from today are still people that I knew and loved from growing up. So found that love at the very early age of like 11, that I got involved with my first show, and lots of great skills that came from that. So I loved the lighting department, and I had a great mentor there, a guy called John Rankin, and John and I were like fast friends. And so fast forward a little bit, a few years later, my family moves to Denver, and what I realized after being in Denver for, I don't know, 6 months or something like that, is that I had no real passion in my life. I was going to high school. I didn't really, like I was good in school, but I could care less. And I, didn't really like to take books home or study or any of that sort of stuff, and still sort of figured out how to pull A's and B's, which seemed like good enough for me. And so I went and found an internship at the Denver Center Theater Company, and it was an amazing place to work. And I had no idea how great that would be for me, and got me some side work to so in addition to the theater stuff, to be able to do some rock concerts on the side, and then that spun a whole new a whole new love for me with the live music aspect and I love the live performance of all of those things. And it was really super fun. So just being out there and being able to light different bands, or to tour, or to go do a bunch of dates with the different people and stuff. And it was just, every night was a new adventure. And it was just really cool. And I think the best part was, for me, was the very, the first cue of every show in that world is to turn off the house lights in the arena or at the stadium or whatever.
You're the guy.
Yeah, like I'm that dude, right? Like I push the button and I get the first applause of the night every single night.
That's me, guys, right here.
That's it. I could go home now. See you, bye. I got huge applause, and that was awesome. It was definitely an addiction.
Give me the craziest, only in the rock star world story that you have. You can keep it anonymous if you like, but if you reveal their identity, it's probably even more fun.
This will tell you how good this was, but we had a triple bill one night, and we were in Vail, Colorado, and at Dobson Ice Arena. And I can't tell you who the opener was, and I can't tell you who the headliner was.
Okay. The story's got to be good.
No, because I just don't remember, because the middle band was a band called Ozo Motley, and they were so spectacular, and they put on such an amazing show that started from the moment that the first band, the opening band, that was their last song. They played their 15, 20 minutes. They were done. I turn on the house lights. I call for the crew. I'm like, set change, let's go. Let's try and keep this to 10 minutes or less. And everybody starts to swarm the stage. And from the back of the room, I hear all this commotion, and I turn around, and it's the band, and they're out there with marching band instruments. And I call over radio. I'm like, I don't know what the heck's happening, but you guys, everybody else go to stage, get the set change. I better stay here just in case, because who knows what's going on. It was the best introduction that I think that any band has ever done ever. Because
That's cool.
They came out, they were in the crowd, they worked the crowd with these marching band instruments. So just a single snare drum, a trumpet, a trombone, and the lead singer had a megaphone. And they worked that crowd all the way up and around. They came and sat right in front of the sound mix and the lighting board where I was. And they stopped in the middle there, and they got the whole crowd. Like, the whole crowd was just full of emotion, and everybody was cheering. It was just this huge thing. And they just kind of they started to bring the level down, and it got a little softer, and they got a little softer. And everybody sat on the floor of this arena. And
they had them in the palm of their hands.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Like, you could hear a pin drop at this moment. And like, the lead singer was just doing a little hush over the crowd sort of thing, completely sitting on the floor, barely making a noise. And the trombone player just jumps up and starts to play the first couple notes of the Hokey Pokey. Ba-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And the crowd just erupts with like joy and laughter and fun and excitement. And everybody starts dancing, and they led a conga line up to the front of the stage. And without missing a beat, the set change had been completed already. And they walked right up onto the stage, and the drummer took off the snare drum and sat down at the drum kit and just started playing. And the trumpet player stands at the microphone and just starts going. And the lead singer starts singing into a microphone. And I turned the house lights off, and the whole party had already been going for 15 minutes during the set change.
Amazing.
And it was such an incredible set that they played that night, and they played up until the minute that they had the whole set list and done. And I got to tell you, like, I was blown away by this band. Incredible. And at the very end of their set, like, I turned on the house lights as was normal again to go to set change for the headliner. And I got to tell you, it was a huge letdown that there was like, that was it. Like, for me, that was the end of the concert. Everybody could have walked away at that moment. And the headliner, whoever it was, so it didn't make an impression on me to this day. Like, what it felt like a letdown compared to an amazing experience.
That's the magic of live music, right?
Yeah.
It's like that to see a working band like that, which I've heard of. I know Ozomadli. I maybe even seen them at some point.
Yeah.
But they're not a household name.
Correct.
But they're a working band, right? To see a band like that put that kind of effort in is just magical. Yeah.
Hands down, one of the best events ever. And I love that nervous anticipation, anxious, positive anxiety, really, of like, I never know what's about to happen, but I trust that great things are about to happen. No matter what, like, this is going to be an awesome work of art today. And I can't wait to see what the result is. Yeah.
So cool. Thanks for sharing that story. So you end up meeting your wife, who'd already started her dance studio. How did you end up coming into that business? Because family businesses and working with spouses can be fraught with danger.
Yeah. And that's the normal reaction. I met her working at a performance, and she saw me running all this production stuff and said, hey, like, what are you doing over there? Are you doing all this lighting? I said, yeah. She said, I've got a dance studio. I've got a dance recital coming up. Can you help me out? And I looked right at her and said, I'll do whatever you ever want. And that's a line that she reminds me of to this very day, of course. And so I just kind of jumped right in, right? Like, so that was, it was super fun, and I knew nothing about it. And as a good sort of entrepreneur, I figured it out as we went along. And at the time, she had 2 dance rooms, and I met her and she's like, what do you think? Should we add a 3rd dance room? I'm like, I don't know. Let's run some numbers on this. And so we sat down and talked about it. I'm like, have to do this many classes with this many students, and just kind of like designed it out. And she was like, yeah, well, I think we could do that. I'm like, great, let's go then. And we just kept growing it. And people used to ask me all the time, they're like, oh my gosh, I could never work with my spouse. What's that like? Or kind of give those type of comments. And we really loved it. I mean, like, it was fantastic for us to be together every day, to know what's going on. And which was very opposite than, like back in the rock and roll days, where I would call my girlfriend or whatever at the time and be like, how's your day? And she would, ask the same question back. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like, this most amazing moment just happened. Right. And she wasn't there. She wasn't at the concert. She wasn't at whatever the event was. And so it just, I don't know, it felt very connecting for us to be able to be there and together and know that we had each other's back 100%. And it was someone I could absolutely rely on and trust in each and every day.
It's funny because your title on LinkedIn is the guy who does everything but teach dance.
That's right.
So it sounds like you slotted into some kind of need that your then girlfriend, now wife, had for the business.
Yeah. You need me to answer the phones? Sure, I'll do it. You need me to sell tap shoes? Absolutely. I've never fit somebody for shoes before in my entire life, but this seems good, right?
Yeah.
And just like, and that ability to kind of do any and all of those things. And it was really a lot of on-the-job training, and especially way back in the day sort of thing. I mean, we had just barely got a computer system in 1999 sort of thing. And so to set that up and like have some sort of software to track the payments instead of like a receipt book, which is how they tracked the payments before I got there.
Yeah.
I'm like, let's try this. Let's try this software and see what it was. And that was, and it was really good. So trial and error. And I always say that I will beat my head against the wall for at least 7 seconds longer than somebody else. And that's what's made me successful to this day.
I imagine there have been some ups and downs over 20 plus years of running this business. So you were there before 9/11. You were there 07 financial meltdown. There, of course, was the pandemic. Talk about some of those the highs and lows over the years and what those experiences were like.
Yeah, as a studio, we kind of always experienced slow, steady growth. We never really had like we're up 30% this year. It just didn't happen. Like we were like solid, like this is a 6% growth year. Fantastic. And so is next year, and so is next year, and so is next year. So we were always slow and steady and a lot of word of mouth. And so we didn't have to advertise a bunch. And it was, and we were lucky in some of those aspects that we didn't have to. I remember like canceling our phone book ad for the first time because I'm like, I don't think people are using phone books anymore. But that was like a huge decision. Could we cancel the ad out of the phone book, or just go with the phone number listing instead of having to have a display ad? And if you're old enough to remember any of that sort of stuff, like hats off to you that you're still here.
Yeah.
It was a big deal.
Yeah.
And it was our biggest expense other than people and rent was the
It's amazing how much they charge for those ads. Yeah.
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 And the fact that people still produce those, or that,
I mean, it's where eyeballs were back then, right? Before the internet. So yeah,
we had to do it, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, those were big things. We weren't really affected by things, even like in 2008 with the financial crisis. We weren't seeing a drop. Like, in fact, that was our best year for summer camps ever. Well, I'm sure we surpassed that now. I don't remember what the numbers were then compared to now, but like all of a sudden, I don't think people were traveling that year. And so it ended up being a really good year for the dance studio because like people were like, well, we're not going to Hawaii, but
right, got to keep our kids busy.
Dance class this summer, or do an extra summer workshop. And so we were through the roof that year. And that was the year that we took on to say with something we talked about on this beach right here, just 6 minutes away from where I'm standing right now is this beach. And Stephanie and I would walk and talk, and we would have these great conversations and talk about life and talk about what we wanted to do and how we could get there and all these things, and all these great ideas were coming to us while walking the beach, which was a good time that we, shut down the rest of the world and we had plenty of time to discuss these things. And we talked about it a year before that and said we should really buy a place. We should really buy a building because the space that we're in was probably, it didn't seem like it was going to be an if this might get torn down. It was a when this building that we were in would be torn down. And to compound that, we had a landlord that took it over that's a developer that said, we'd like to offer you a 90-day extension on your lease. And I'm like, we cannot operate a business like that where we're trying to extend our lease for 90 days at a time. We've got to find a building that we can purchase. And so during 2008, I go to my bank. I'm like, listen, we want to buy a building. And they said, great, good idea. And I said, let's pre-qualify for this loan so we know how much we can spend. And we're in Denver in Cherry Creek North, which is like, for anybody that's not familiar, is like the Rodeo Drive of Denver. Hermes store close to us. Like there's all these, Janus funds, their world headquarters a block away, right?
Not
like,
cheap real estate.
Correct. Yes. The most expensive real estate in all of Denver, including more than downtown. Great. So here we are. I go to the bank. I'm like, here's the deal. I want to pre-qualify. They said, great, you can pre-qualify for a mortgage. I'm like, amazing. What do you think? They came back. Let's crunch our numbers. They're like, good news. You qualify for a mortgage of $100,000. I'm like, awesome. I think that buys me a closet in this neighborhood. And like, we need more. Like, I'm thinking like, a couple of $1 million. Then they're like, oh, you're nowhere close to that. And I'm like, oh my gosh, what a failure. This is horrible. How do I do this? Clearly it's the bank's fault. I go out to another bank, same thing. They came back and they said, well, you qualify for like 150,000. I'm like, great, let's go in the right direction. But it's going to be a long time before I get to a couple of $1 million at that point. And so it was a tough time to look for money. It was a really tough situation. I felt like I was going towards a brick wall. I just didn't know how fast, like we would be able to, like when we could do this or and how to do that. And I really looked to our purpose, which is to create art. And I kept talking to people and saying like, hey, I gotta create more art. And we found this building that would be absolutely perfect for us. And I went to the CFO of the company and I said, hey, I need to buy this building. Great, makes an offer. I said, what do you want? He said $5 million. I said, great. And he goes, great, we got a deal. And so we inked this deal. And I put down $100,000, which was all the money that we had at the time in the world. I put that down as a down payment. It was in escrow. Things are looking great. And my broker goes, where are you going to come up with the money? I'm like, no problem. I got this SBA plan. We're going to do an SBA loan. It's going to be great. We go through the SBA process. We've got 90 days with the building under contract. And the SBA calls me in like a week and says, we've pre-approved you. However, we can't find a bank to take the other half of this deal because it's 2008 and it's the worst time ever to look for money. And so we're trying, and nobody's like, we're shopping this deal around. We went to, I think it was, I had a whole list. I created a spreadsheet. Let's go down the list with every lender that does SBA lending. And like 86 out of 86 said no.
Wow.
And so we were like, what do we do? And I went back to the CFO of the company, and it's, on day 89, and I looked at it, or talking on the phone, and I said, hey, we got a dead deal. And he said, what do you mean? I said, I just can't find anybody to take the loan. And I thought about it, and I went right to my purpose statement, which is to create art so that everyone can discover their own inspiration, love, and greatness. And over the phone, I said to him, Scott, here's the deal. I need this building because I need to be able to go create art. Everything I do is so that I can go create art each and every day. It's what I used to do in the rock and roll industry. It's what I do today at the dance studio. I need to go create art, and I need this building because we need to do this on a bigger scale with more people. We need to inspire more lives to create their own dance, to create their own art. And I just kind of laid it out there for him, and then I just left it, and I stopped talking. And he didn't respond for like an hour and a half, I'm pretty sure.
Hour and a half.
Really it's probably like a second.
Felt like an hour and a half. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. It felt like an hour and a half. It was probably 3.5 seconds. And he just goes, all right, we'll do it. And I go, what do you mean? And he said, we'll do it. I said, no, I don't think you understand. Like, I can't find the money. I can't find a lender to do this. And he goes, no, we'll do it. We'll be the bank for you. We'll finance the deal. Give us the 10% down that you're going to give to the SBA, and we'll do the deal.
And you didn't even think this was a possibility? Like you had
no, of course
really,
not.
Really,
there was
wow.
nothing. I right. I didn't go to college. I don't have a master's degree. I'm not a business guy.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Like, I didn't go to B school. Like none of these things. So not even a thought in my mind that the seller would carry this note.
Yeah.
And he goes, just give us the $500,000 that you're going to give to the SBA. So we'll be at 10% down. We'll be the lender. And I said, hey, you know that $100,000 that we gave you? And he goes, yeah. And I go, that's all the money I have in the world. And he goes, how are you going to get it for the SBA like in the next week? And I said, I don't know. It just works out when it's supposed to. And he goes, I can't believe I'm going to say this, but all right, we'll do it. We'll do it. We'll give it to you $100,000 down. How are you going to do the build out on this building? Because like, that's just the cost of the building. How are you going to do the build out for this, to put in the hardwood floors, to put in the mirrors? And I said, you got $100,000 that you can loan me? He said no to that. I said, don't worry, I'll figure it out. I'll go through, and we maxed every one of our credit cards. Within the next 90 days, we
in the midst of this financial recession, you must have had some family members who said you were nuts.
Everybody said we were nuts. The banks, like that 86 banks that we talked to, like it was legit. I think Wells Fargo turned us down within 3 minutes. Like I don't. They're like, what is this SBA deal? No. Like it was an absolute no. They weren't even looking at things, but that's what it took. Everybody thought we were absolutely insane. And it's the 1 year in our history that we actually had a huge increase. We went from six dance rooms at the time up to 9, or maybe
because of the new space. The new space had a lot more. Okay,
we're able to level up, and our revenue just jumped with us. So we went. That was the one and only year that we were ever up. Like it was like 30% that we gained overnight just by having more availability. And we offered way more classes. And I went to all my vendors. I went to our main dancewear supplier, and I'm like, by the way, I know you give us awesome terms on all this stuff, but I'm not going to pay you in 6 months. I need, at least a year to pay you on this stuff. And they're like, you've always been a good customer. You've always been good with communication to us. No problem. And so I used every resource to make sure that we could succeed, and I had everybody rooting for us. And that was a good key for our success.
So we've been through some other crises and pandemics since then. What's our takeaway from you going through that experience?
Yeah. Talk to everybody, communicate with absolutely everybody at every given moment. And in the case of the pandemic, we went from, boy, was I so wrong and had so much egg on my face, because on Friday, the 13th of March, 3 years ago, I was sitting there saying, like, this is not a thing. We're not closing. They can't make us close. Really, that would never happen. To on Sunday, having a sit down with the entire team to say, not only was I wrong 48 hours ago, but like really wrong. And I don't know when we're going to have classes again. I don't know what we're going to do. And on Monday, we had been early users of Zoom. And so on Sunday night, we hatched a plan to have a few classes on Zoom on Monday, Tuesday as well. Like Tuesday, we had our full schedule on Zoom. Like we're like, let's just
by Tuesday.
Yeah, by Tuesday.
Wow. So everyone's in their home. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I started a campaign with our general manager, with everybody else. Like we called every one of our customers by that Friday of that week. We called down the list, and I just called people and I said, how are you? What's going on for you? Tell us what you need, or what's your situation, and how can we help? And like, I think our handyman that we always kind of have around, Alejandro, he's an amazing person. I think I sent him to probably like 100 different people's homes to help them install a desk, or to, do something. Someone's like, do you have a dry cleaner that's still open? I'm like, yeah, we have a parent that has a dry cleaning business. I'll have them come by your house and pick up your dry cleaning. I don't know where you're going to wear it, but we'll have them pick it up and deliver it for you. And it was just connecting that community together and saying, what else can we do for you? And people were calling back and saying, okay, so what can we do for you? I'm like, I just need your support. So you've already paid March tuition, but April's coming in another week, and I'm going to need you to pay April tuition, whether you can get online or not. And we had people that like, my kid won't do it. Great, don't do it. And they would still pay tuition. And we had some people that were like, I lost my job this week. And I was like, fantastic, stop paying us, but please keep coming to dance class because it's important for you. And so and everybody got an immediate free pass. Anybody that said, I can't afford it, we're like, don't do it then. But keep coming, but don't pay us. And when you feel it's okay to pay again, you'll pay us. And when you, if that day never comes, that's actually, it's worse for you than it is for us.
Yeah. So
how else can we help in this situation? And we went through and talked to every single customer, and we kept doing it. We kept calling to make sure that everybody, all of our people, were okay. If we weren't, we were pulling every string that we possibly could to help them.
You didn't have a roadmap for this. I mean, you'd been through hard times previously, but I mean, what was it like for you personally going through it? And by the way, I should also mention, this was 3 years ago. And I think you said that it was 5 to 7 years ago that you'd kind of pulled out of the business. So this was pulling you back in.
Correct. And it was, it was super scary. Yeah. I basically was not as much in the day to day from like 7 years ago on, 6, 7 years ago, something like that. And so I really wasn't around the day to day as much anymore. And it's something that I truly missed, was the interaction with all of our customers and all of our people. It was a big deal. So I absolutely, all of my other consulting work and things like that was instantly dried up too. And so like,
you had time.
Yeah. I did call all my normal sort of consulting clients, and we were talking about the same thing. And I was getting people together and sharing resources and just, sort of like that typical format, like, what else can we do? How else can we bond? We had work groups on the PPP application, for example, of people getting together to work on the PPP all on its own, just on Zoom. All right, what do you put in this box? Right?
Yeah.
Where do I find that number? Okay, hold on a second. I got to figure out where that number comes from for me. And it was an amazing thing to to be on a work group. And those were things that I'm like, it was just from my friends. Like, they're like, I don't know how to do this either. I'm like, me neither, but help me help you. Let's get together. And who else can we invite? Who else needs this?
Yeah.
Let's do it.
Yeah. It's wonderful to see a lot of that stuff coming together. And when I think back on that period of time, while it was scary in the moment, and it was sad in the moment to see it all happening, people dying, there's some fondness that we have, I think, thinking about those positive elements of people coming together. You had another interesting experience. So you had been friends with Simon Sinek, the author, speaker. How had you gotten to know him? And then you'd known him for a number of years. And then during the pandemic, you actually came in and helped him with his business, which didn't have as much of an online component.
Yeah, it had nothing. We met in 2007 or it's like 2007. And that's after hearing him the first time, we became friends because I heard him speak at a conference with like 40 other people in the room. Like that was it. It was super small and turned out to be like his second big speech ever. And so I know that my life changed that day because we started talking about my why, purpose, right? And I had a call with Stephanie from that room after I scribbled out a whole bunch of notes with him, his session. Called Steph. I'm like, we're doing this all wrong. And that's where like he and I sat at my kitchen counter until like 4 a.m. one night, talking about art, talking about dance. When he happened to be in town, a few months later, happened to be in Denver. And so we sat at my kitchen counter till 4 a.m. and we drank a bottle of wine and we created my why statement. And it's like, that's what sort of set me on that path. And when I was talking to the CFO of that company and saying like, I got to create art, it's because I have to live my why. And so it was his voice that was echoing in my head at that moment to say like, use your why. Okay, I'm going to use it to create art so that everyone can discover their own inspiration, love, and greatness. And I have that all over the place. I was just digging for my journal right here, right? So my why statement on the journal, I've got reminders of that all over the place, all over my desk, all the way around, so that I never forget about that, to work towards that purpose each and every day. And so I heard Simon's voice in my head there. I heard it, throughout, and he and I stayed connected. I often brought him in to speaking events for EO, for lots of different things. And we just kept deepening our relationship. And so right before pandemic, I called his chief of staff, his CEO, to say like, hey, I need Simon for this event. She said, no way. And we kept talking because for years, she and I had been trying to meet up, and she lived in New York, and I kept trying to like meet up with her because I'm like, you're like, how do we not know each other after all these years, sort of thing. And finally, one day I called and I said, listen, I'm coming to New York. My main point is to come and see you. So you tell me where you're going to be for this like 5-day stretch, and I will be there. And she goes, fantastic. I can't wait to meet you in person finally, but it can't be in New York. I moved to Denver a month ago. I'm like, are you kidding me? And so it took us like another 3 months to get a date on our calendar, and we got together, and it was like the biggest hug because it was like we had been friends forever and just never knew it, right? Like, so a huge hug, and we sat down and talked, and over one dinner, she's like, you have to come and deliver the message because everything that you've talked about and everything you've done at the dance studio has been a representation of Simon's work, right? Like you put your why into place, you're living, breathing proof that this works. I'm like, great. So I got hired to do Simon's content, to speak for Simon, to go out and do a speech. And before I could even do it, well, we did one event. And after that, pandemic hit. And all of a sudden it was, their business model, which was to go out and speak to people in front of a room full of people, now doesn't work.
Yeah.
Yeah. By the way, all of our businesses that I had with the consulting company, with the dance studio, was about getting groups of people together in person and having a live event.
Yeah.
So as varied as I thought I was,
it wasn't not as diversified. I mean, you weren't the only one. There are lots of people that didn't realize, or they were more diversified than they realized, but in odd ways that were unexpected. Yeah.
So we took the dance studio classes online by day 2, right? Like we were basically online and ready to go, and had, I took TVs off the wall and set it up so that instructors could see the classes in big format. And Simon came to the group of us and said, we need to create our programming. We need to go online. And we got obsessed with this one question that came from a good friend, Jen. And she said, what can we create that would be amazing as a virtual experience compared to what's worked in the past? And we became, as a team, we became obsessed with that question. And I took it into, what can we create as a virtual thing so great that it would suck if it were in person? Because we don't want to just take what we had and do it online, because it might not work, or it might not be the best thing. And so with the people so not only did we do that with Simon's team and took his work and created it, and things that they did as a half-day workshop, for example, we're now trying, or a full-day workshop, we're trying to cut into a 2-hour segment so that we could keep people's attention online, not have to give a bathroom break in the middle of this program, right? Like, it was that we're talking about it in that much minutia sort of thing. What's the maximum time we think people can sit at their computer screen to do something and not have to go pee? So it was that. And we did that with the dance studio. It changed our classes. It changed our class structure. It changed the way that people pay. It changed the way that we interacted with our customers and things too. And that was a great thing with all the CEOs that I coach, that, again, I used to like fly around or go work with a leadership team, in person somewhere in the world. And now I can't do that. So what can we do now for that leadership team that isn't the same as being in the room? We got to create something that's different and better, and an amazing experience virtually rather than the other way around.
It's a great way of thinking about it. And I do want to ask you, I know I'm mindful of the clock. We're almost out of time. Last question. Actually, two quick questions. One,
let's talk all day. Let's go. We'll record another episode. We'll do part 2.
We might have to do that. I didn't get a chance to ask you about this idea of going to the Bahamas. I mean, everyone's going to want to know that. I mean, that I'm sure you can answer it in 30 seconds, but I mean, like, what are the steps? If I'm watching this, I'm thinking, oh, that sounds amazing. I mean, here you've got one business as a physical business that requires your or Stephanie's physical presence. So that's not an easy one. So how did you accomplish that?
You heard my timeline, right? Like, it's a tales all the time. A rock designer who then became a dance studio owner.
Natural progression. Oh, it makes total sense.
Why wouldn't you own a hotel in Marina then next, right? Like, that's you have a nickel for every time you've heard that story. We fell in love with the beach here on Harbour Island in the Bahamas 23 years ago. And we've just been coming ever since as a guest, right? Like, and constantly and more. And about 10 years ago, Stephanie looked at me. We're planning out our vacations for the year. She said, I think we should take 4 vacations this year. I said, great. And she said, I think all 4 of them should be in Harbour Island. And I went, great, let's go. And so we were renting places. We go to hotels. We rented a house a couple of times. Like, so we had a little bit of a pattern going. And at that time, this hotel project that we have now is a condo hotel. And so we figured out about 8 years ago that we could buy one of these condos, and we did. And we started spending more and more time there here. And that was and it just became everything that we would do would be to say, like, does this get us closer to Harbour Island or not? And on days that, like, I need a pep talk, Stephanie would just text me, Harbor, Harbor, Harbor. Right? So we're like driving towards this all the time. That, should we make this decision? Should we buy a new car or not? Does it get us closer to Harbour Island or not? And it was a constant sense of discipline for us to, how do we do this? What can we do? How can we go about this? Because we want to spend more time here than anywhere else in the world. And so that's how we got here so much physically. I could tell you a whole nother story about the mechanics of this deal, which has been like absolutely insane. And that's a whole nother podcast, and it might include a bunch of
I do love, but I do love the filter of, making sure that every decision is driving towards that. All right. And then the last question is my gratitude question. I'm a big fan of gratitude, especially expressing gratitude to those who've helped you along the way. A lot of times people will mention their family or friends, which is natural, but really what I'm getting at is peers, contemporaries, those you mentioned your best friend growing up, someone like that has really kind of helped you and supported you.
Yeah. in thinking about this question for the podcast, the story that came to mind immediately, without even thinking about it, was about my boss, my first mentor really in my life, a guy called Charles McLeod, who was at the Denver Center Theater Company. He was the lighting director for the company. And I, as a high school intern, started working for him, under him. And he was just amazing, humorous guy. We had a ton of fun. I really enjoyed working with him, and got to, every morning he came in, he talked to me. I had a little office, and he would talk to me every morning, kind of, how are you? How's the day? All right, let's lay out the priorities for the day. And we would talk about them. And then he's like, sometimes I got to spend the day with him. Other times he's like, I'll see you later. And most days he would come back to my office around 5 o'clock or 4:45, and we'd find each other and reconnect and say, how was it? What happened? And so it was really good. Sort of gave me a sense of almost like a bookshelf on that to, be able to close, open and close the day with him. And I got this call one day from this guy, and he said, hey, I want you to interview for a job with me. And it was at this lighting rental company that was a supplier to us. And I said, gosh, I know who you are, but I have a job, like I'm good. And he said, yeah, I know your boss, Charles, told me to call you. And I said, okay. And he said, you should interview for this job. And so I'm like, all right, that sounds weird, but okay. And he said, why don't you come by today on your way after work? And I said, all right. I went over to the shop, and I looked at him, and we sat there and talked. And by the end of this, he said, great. All right. So you're hired. When can you start? And I went, I don't know. I have to go talk to Charles about this. Like, this doesn't feel right to do. Like, I got to go talk to Charles. And so I drove back downtown, and I went to the theater, and I found Charles, and I said, hey, can I talk to you? And he goes, yeah, of course. And sat down at his desk, and I said, and the guy had already told me, like, Charles told me to call you. Charles said that you'd be perfect for this job. Like, Charles said this. And I'm like, so I go back to Charles, and I'm like, do you not like me anymore?
A little bit of mixed message. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And he's like, what are you talking about? And I said, I don't know. I get this call from Tom, and he said, you got to interview for this job. And Charles said to, and now he's like, he wants to hire me. And like, I don't know. What do I do? Like, do you not like me? Am I not doing a good enough job? And he goes, no. He goes, I love you. You're doing an amazing job. And I've taught you everything I can right now. And you need to take this job because you need to go experience the world. It's time for you to go fly for a little bit. And I can't do that for you right now. You have to go experience the world for yourself. So yeah, you should take this job. And I was like devastated, like crying, getting emotional already thinking about it, right? To just like to leave that. And I felt like I was leaving Charles and letting him down. And I went to work at the first day over there, and it was fine, but it wasn't like it was under Charles. And but I didn't realize how much of a gift he gave me that day, because Charles knew me. He knew that I would probably stay there forever, maybe, and just continue to work with him. And he thought that this was better. He could see more in me than I could in myself. Yeah,
what a generous act. Lee, this has been such great conversation. Thank you so much for your time. Where can people go to learn more about you? And we haven't even kind of talking about the work that you do through Hesse Partners. I know that's one of the different things you do. So where can people go connect with you?
On LinkedIn is great. You can find me there. My last name, I'm sure it's in the title. It's pretty unique, So find me on LinkedIn. You can email me, lee@hessepartners.com, HESSE partners.com. Find some work there, or really come find me on the beach here. Come to Valentines Resort and in Marina down in Harbour Island. Let's have these conversations on the beach, because I think that's where a bunch of my great conversations and the great thinking happens.
That sounds amazing. All right, Lee, thanks so much.
Pleasure.
Thank you for listening to the Smart Business Revolution podcast with John Corcoran. Find out more at smartbusinessrevolution.com. And while you're there, sign up for our email list and join the revolution. Revolution. And be listening for the next episode of the Smart Business Revolution podcast.